Thank you for coming. Thank you. Welcome to New York Viral Media. I'm Charlie Oliver. I'm the organizer. I'm also the founder of Surfresh Media, which manages this meetup. We took it over a couple of months ago. This is our second meetup. It's exciting and wow to see so many of you guys here. This is telling us that these conversations about viral media today needs to happen. The group was actually dormant for about 2 years. There was no meetups, and the person who's running it didn't really feel the need to do it. So this is great. We look forward to your feedback and your participation. If you guys can just let me know by show of hands how many of you are actually members of the meetup, that would be awesome. Hands in the air. Wow, okay. Fantastic. If you're not, go to meetup.com, look for New York Viral Media Meetup. There's 970 something of us strong and digital media. Woo! And as you can see, a very diverse group. So welcome. We've got a great panel for you today, and I'm very excited to have these guys up here. Deadly Outbreak, how negative viral media spreads and how to reverse its course. Because to be honest with you, I don't think we talk enough about how to undo what gets done online in terms of damage and damage control, even though we all know that's the mother lode right there. So we have a panel today that is absolutely incredible. We are very lucky. I'm very, very humbled to have these guys with us. We have Jonah Berger, who is an author of a New York Times bestseller and a professor of viral media marketing at Wharton. Thanks for coming. We have Zammuto, right? A reputation changer. #1 reputation management firm online, correct? Right. #1. Okay. So yeah, I looked it up. #1 all across the board. Google says you're #1.
Is that right?
Yeah, every research that I did, every return said you guys are #1. So awesome. He will give us a presentation to kind of tell us what they do, because I don't think most of us really, myself included, to be honest with you, really understand what reputation management is online and kind of some of the challenges and getting Google to say that you're not a pervert, you're not a thief, you're not a molester, you're not, it's not me, Google. Daddy, please.
After they said you were.
After they said you were, yeah, you know what I mean? It's like, hello. We have Erik Martin. Where's that? Okay. We were waiting for Erik Martin, and we were so happy that he's here. I'm sorry to put you on blast. Right. I didn't want them to think we were late because of me. Okay. Erik Martin is the general manager of Reddit.com. How many people here are Redditors? Wow, that's fierce. How many people here are in the Reddit meetup group? Okay, because I know we talked to you. Oh, yay. So you got my email, the invitation.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. And where would we be without our sponsors? Our sponsors are sponsors. So we have 3 incredible sponsors, 2 more so than the other. We have the 7th Chamber, who was with us for our first meetup last month. And they sponsored us with beverages, and today they brought beer, which we desperately need on a hot day. And we have John,
From the 7th Chamber.
From the 7th Chamber, yes. When he's going to talk for a few minutes about what they do, because they do viral media too. They work with actually a lot of agencies and brands, and they work with seeding videos to kind of grow them and get them out there and turn them viral. They're incredible. So he'll let you know exactly what they do and how that can help you, or how you can learn more about it. We have Video Inc. Video Inc. just joined us this month. They are huge supporters of our group too. They are now our media partners, meaning, is she here? Where's Jocelyn? That's Jocelyn from Video Inc. She's here. She'll be here at the end too. They'll be covering our meetups and just providing kind of a recap and photos. And their website is awesome in that they do. It's kind of like the Hollywood Reporter, but for video deals, right? Yeah. Okay, fantastic. All right, and Surfresh Media is my baby. So we do social media amplification of events, large-scale events. So anyway, let's get this started, because I know you guys have been waiting long enough. We're going to start with our sponsor, who's going to give us a kind of a brief presentation and tell us what they do, and then we're going to go into the other presentations. And all right, can you project?
I can.
All right, that's what it's about. Thank you, guys.
Keep it very short. Instead of telling you what we do, we thought we'd show you an example of one of our new products. what we do in our kind of day-to-day life is help videos go viral. And one of the things we realized is we didn't really understand the disbursement pattern of these videos and what makes them go viral. So when this comes up, I want to show you a most recent campaign. We launched a new product. It's called Swarm. And what we do is track content as it spreads across the internet. And we do this a couple different ways. But one of the primary ways we try to track it is to have the content viewed by who we deem to be influential people, and then track how this content goes out there into the world. Long story short, we have a discovery phase. We send out your content to a select group of people, and we monitor how they engage with the content and how it spreads from that. We take all those analytics, bring it back, and create a custom medium buying program. It's all kind of programmatic. And then from that, we launch a programmatic buying spree across different platforms based on who is engaging with your content. So this was our Mother's Day campaign for Revlon, which we just actually closed. They had a unique problem. They had 2 pieces of content. They thought they were both great. They wanted to know which one the world would like. Had the same kind of target demos, same interest groups, the same personas, and they asked us to help them. So this is kind of what they wanted us to figure out for them. From that, we launched one of the videos, launched with influencers, which is the white line, and then you see the yellow line, which are kind of their followers and people that they're interested, that follow them to see if they engage with that video too. We had a decent kind of turn of events. Then we launched the second one, and we saw this pattern, which shows you the power of that second video, because the follower group, which is the yellow side, is an exponential return on the number of people who watch that video. And that's the true network effect that we kind of established. So from this, we kind of want to look at each property and understand how that content goes out there into the world. And what we kind of saw, and I wish I had my laser pointer here, is if you follow kind of the yellow and the white line here, the white line is how the influencers engage with the content, and the spread between the white and the yellow dotted line is kind of what we're calling the network effect that's happening. And a way to think about this is the yellow lines are actually 10 times as great as the white lines. So as this content goes out in the world, we're seeing a 10 times return on that investment to get that content in front of that individual influencer, because it really does go viral. And we monitor this across almost every social network right now to really understand how content is distributed and what these networks like. And we take all that information and we put together what I call a planning phase, where we do the programmatic analysis of where we should be buying media for you. And then we launch that across the spectrum here, and you'll see we start to get really great results because we're targeting the right people instead of doing blind pools. Just general stuff like this is who we're looking at there and who likes our videos and the content out there. We look at cloud scores, we look at Twitter, we look at Facebook posts, we look at everything about your network to understand how it all works. One last thing to look at, and this is something that people seem to not understand, just because people are watching your video, it doesn't mean that they are interacting with it in a way that drives value to you, right? These look essentially the same. But this second video really gave a 10 times return on the actual advertiser because it went so viral. That's something that your metrics sometimes don't capture, and it's important to think about. And that's it. Said I'd keep it short.
Yeah, thank you. So can we make the, John, will the presentation be available? Can we, afterwards, can I send it out or post it?
We'll send you a PDF.
Okay, awesome. So it'll be available. Okay. And next we have Mike. Awesome. You guys should definitely check him out. Michael's from the Zammuto. I always say it wrong. I'm sorry. Mike Zammuto.
Very good.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. And so he's from Reputation Change. I'll let him tell you who he is and what he does.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for coming. Again, my name is Michael Zammuto. The company I'm with is called Reputation Changer. I'm the company's president. And what we do is we're top rated and one of the largest reputation management companies in the world. And our clientele ranges from a relatively small number of kind of consumers, people of no real prominence, up through some very large organizations, including world religion, several networks, and several governments, foreign governments, some people from the Obama administration, some Fortune 100 companies. And the reason why this is relevant is because of what's happened to the internet over the last 10 years. Now, we don't have to share a lot of statistics on how much it's grown, but one of the ones that I did want to share I thought was really interesting is there's the amount of mobile traffic today is equivalent to all internet traffic 10 years ago. I think that's a really cool statistic. But what else does it tell you about it? What else has really changed? Well, one of the things that's changed is that Google has come to dominate enormous parts of our lives. We're viewed and researched all the time for all sorts of human interactions and all sorts of human decisions. Google's revenue has gone from $1.5 billion to $50 billion in the last 10 years. We're expecting 2 trillion searches this year. $1.3 trillion in retail sales are steered by online research, and 70% of employers have disqualified a candidate because of something they found about them online and searching for them. Okay? So the question for yourself is, have you Googled yourself today? Now, everybody chuckles when we say this because it sounds like there's some sort of vanity or something. Okay? But the reality of it is that you will never do anything important, I will argue, for the rest of your life without somebody researching you online. And I've got thousands of horror stories I could share that we see all the time for it. Now, there's been an explosion of user-generated content, and some of us in the room have helped that along, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful thing. The ability for people of all types across all sorts of media to publish content and share content is one of the great human developments. But like all other great tools, it can be used as a weapon. Now, some of these sites are their range and their sort of levels of anarchy is the way I like to think of them, right? Some of them, like Wikipedia and the Better Business Bureau, they have mechanisms where they have cultures and rules and things like that, and some other ones don't, you know, and I would argue in some cases social media is like that, certainly review sites are like that, and the review sites are exploding into all sorts of areas. When I say review sites, people always think of Yelp and they think of restaurants and that sort of thing. But essentially every business is reviewed today, whether it's on Amazon or what other sites. We published a press release a few weeks ago to point out that, among other things, Yelp reviews head shops now. And there are review sites for San Francisco cannabis clubs. And there was a site that came out a few weeks ago that's a review site for prostitutes. So if your business hasn't been reviewed, it will be, and you should think about what that means for you, okay? But there's other things going on as well. Jonah and I briefly talked about celebrity cyberbullying. Cyberbullying in general is an interesting thing, and it's really kind of exploded on celebrities this year. Catfishing, the Manny Te'o story is an interesting thing that's also happened. Pretending to be someone or a different type of person than you are. And so what is it that we do exactly, right? Well, what reputation management companies do is they look at the search results and they attempt to influence them in some way. So the things you have to know about yourself is people are searching you, and what they find about you really does matter. So you have to look at those search results as a strategic asset. Now, in the case of a company like this, their story is being told by somebody else, right? There's a rip-off report, Yelp, some other sites that say things about them. And these things are, may be true, they may not be true. But what is true is it's certainly not the whole story, and they're not getting their message out. And we'll talk a little bit later about how this connects in with social marketing and other things like that, right? We often think about these things as viruses, but at least viruses create antibodies that fight them off, and that's not what happens here. There's some great examples up here of companies that have gotten themselves into some really extreme problems, especially on social media settings. Now, I'm not going to argue that some of these companies don't deserve what happened to them. They certainly do. And if I was being timely enough, I would have taken all this down and just put Amanda Bynes stuff up there. If you haven't seen it yet, savor it. It's worthwhile looking at. But McDonald's, for example, came out with a great thing. I think it was a couple of years ago. These McD stories where they were trying to highlight all the great farmers working at it. And instead, they were bombarded with people bashing McDonald's food. This is something they should have obviously predicted. Abercrombie and Fitch, it is amazing the damage you can do to yourself if you're not careful. They're one of the great examples. And then American Rifleman, picked the day of the Aurora shooting to, release this one in the upper left-hand corner. Worse, didn't react and didn't try to fix the situation enough. So, this is an example, and Jonah is the real expert on this, of, what can happen when these things start off and take a life of their own, and that contagion, as the theme of the night goes, really takes off and pushes them. Now, another thing to know about reputation management is that reputation management is about telling your story and crafting and influencing those search results in positive ways that really tell your story, engaging content that really tell all different facets of yourself. But what they're not is a replacement for other things that we do online. So reputation management companies like myself work very closely with social marketing firms, PR firms, SEO firms, and in fact we don't do those services directly, even though some of them are tangentially similar to what we do. We focus exclusively on reputation management because the outcome we're trying to drive is different. We're trying to influence online research, and in the end that's what reputation management companies do. If anyone has some questions or want to interact, there's Twitter handles up there and our website as well. Are there any, should we take questions or do it at the end? Or?
You know, we want to do it at the end just because we kind of want to get started. We're going to have plenty of time for questions, trust me. And I think you'll actually have even more after hearing some of his insights. These guys have incredible stories and insights on viral media. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Okay. Whoa. Jonah. Okay. Okay.
Can you just open up a Word document? I'll just put my website up since I don't have slides.
Oh, sure. Yeah, just a Word document. Word document? Word document? Oh,
Yeah, just you can put my
Okay, you want me to
Great,
put-
yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
JonahBerger.com.
Okay.
So I didn't bring slides today, so I'm just gonna riff on it a little bit.
Yeah, so Jonah Berger has a New York Times best-selling book. He's an author. He has great insights. Actually, Jonah, we did a lot of research on you, obviously, and found...
Hopefully not online. I might be a pedophile.
Well, I found some things, but we'll talk later. But he has... I actually saw some things about you that I thought was really interesting, and you have a... No, nothing bad.
Okay.
But I think one of the things that you said that I thought was really interesting is there's an article on you, and Fast Company has done a series of articles on you, and one, you actually say Malcolm Gladwell's...
The tipping point is half wrong.
There we go. Okay, so that's kind of, which I think I'm surprised you didn't get a lot of backlash on that.
And I'm happy to take that during the question session.
Okay.
I just want to ask a very simple question, which is why do people talk about and share some things rather than others? So whether we're thinking about why content goes viral on the web, or we're thinking about why some products and brands get talked about more offline, many of you know that word of mouth is much more effective than traditional advertising, right? Over 10 times as effective. People trust it much more, and it's much more targeted. But to get word of mouth to work for you, right, if you're running a small business, if you're an entrepreneur, if you have a service, you have an idea, I'm wearing a different shirt, so good at pictures. Right, why are some of these things talked about more than others? And how can we use those insights to help our own products and ideas catch on? So I'm not a social media guru. I'm a professor at the Wharton School. I spent the last 10 years studying the phenomenon of word of mouth and using psychology and sociology to understand the why or the science behind why people talk and share. So if you look online and you type in why are things viral, the answers you used to get were one of two varieties. The first was cats. Right? Cats are the reason that people share things online, which is a great theory, except it's completely and utterly wrong. Right? It doesn't tell us anything why some cat things succeed and some cat things fail. And it doesn't tell us why stuff that has nothing to do with cats actually gets shared. And so instead we focused a lot on the science. So we got 6 months of articles from the New York Times, over 7,000 pieces of content, and did textual analysis and other sorts of things to understand why certain pieces of content make that most email list. What about the content itself drives people to share? We looked at tens of thousands of brands, working with a variety of data providers that have both online and offline data, again to understand not just, okay, brand X gets more word of mouth than brand Y, but why? What about the product itself made people talk about it? And what about the psychology of that product or experience drove people to talk about it? So to make that concrete, I'll give you one example, and there's six key principles that we talk about in the book, 6 key drivers of why people talk and share. Social currency, triggers, emotion, public, practical value, and stories. And I'll just tell you one anecdote because it's a little bit fun. So did you ever know Rebecca Black, that song? Rebecca Black's song, Friday. Right? So Rebecca Black was a 16-year-old girl. Her parents paid $4,000 for a company called Art Music Factory to make a hit for her. Right? And she came out with this overproduced number about waking up in the morning and going to school and dealing with those big teenage dilemmas like whether to sit in the front seat or the back seat of her friend's car. The song comes out and everybody pans it, right? People say it is the worst song ever. Yet, it has 300 million views. So why? What about that song made it hit? Well, if you look at the data, you notice something interesting. So if you type in Rebecca Black in a Google search, you can find the number of times people look for that search item over time. So you have a number of people typing Rebecca Black into YouTube over time. What you see is a spike in attention, and then it goes down. And then another spike, and then it goes down. And then another spike, and then it goes down. And if you look closer, you'll notice that those spikes aren't random. They're actually every 7 days. And if you look even closer, you'll notice that they're every Friday. The same name as Rebecca Black's song. Now, that song is equally bad every day of the week. Right? Bad on Monday, bad on Tuesday, bad on Wednesday, bad on Thursday, bad on... I checked the name of science. But Friday provides a ready reminder, what psychologists would call a trigger, to make us think about and talk about that song. It's not any better or worse on Friday. It's just more likely to be top of mind. For the older folks in the audience, you might remember that Bone Thugs and Harmony song, the first of the month. Right? The same thing with that song. Spikes a lot of attention on the first of the month. And so, as I said, the trigger says is something can be exciting or emotional, all these things, but if we're not thinking about it, we're not going to talk about it and share it. An example here, you can think of it, if I said peanut butter and, right, you might think of the word jelly. Or if I said rum and, you might think of the word peanut butter is like a little advertisement for jelly. Right? Even though I never said jelly, because I said peanut butter, you started thinking about jelly. And so cues or triggers in the environment can make us think of related things and make us talk about it or share it. Just like Friday makes us think of Rebecca Black, other cues in the environment can trigger us to think about products or brands and trot them out and pass them on. So that is a very short introduction to the book. There's a whole book to read about those ideas. Check out the website. You can find me at J1Berger on Twitter, and I look forward to answering your questions in a couple minutes. Thanks.
And also, we're going to have a workshop with him. He's doing a workshop for us, New York Viral Media, and anyone else who'd like to go. At the end of the month, we'll give you that information, that link. It's going to be fantastic. June 26th, right?
You know better than I do.
I sure did, June 26th. So. And he'll be going into his principles in the book and viral media and how to kind of understand it far better than we do, because I think all of us are kind of a little bit good. So anyway, thank you so much. Yeah. So. Yeah, we're gonna. I was going to interview one. Would you ask me? Really? Okay, great. Okay, so. Thank you. So here's the deal. I'm forever experimenting with panels. Bear with me, please. I try to do the best that I can, because I know when I sit in an audience and I don't feel like I've gotten what I want, it's like, when I'm looking at a panel. So this panel is so incredible that I did want each one to come up and speak on their own behalf and kind of give you their flavor, what they do. And Erik Martin, of course, being the general manager of Reddit, I had to get him up here for a few minutes by himself and kind of talk to him, and then we'll bring everybody else up and get on panel and start talking about some topical negative viral media stuff that's been happening, which you know more about than I do, right? Okay, all right. So I tend to go about this as if I'm kind of just meeting you and trying to figure out who you are and what you're about and everything. So it won't be long, but let's get it popping. So. Great. How did you start working with Reddit?
So I used to be a filmmaker back in like early 2000s. Okay. And I was a big fan of Paul Graham. And he had an amazing book, Hackers and Painters, which everyone should read if you haven't.
Hackers and Painters.
And then started reading the essays he posted on his blog. And then Paul Graham started Y Combinator. Right. And as a young, naive filmmaker, I applied to do a documentary on the first round of Y Combinator startups. They did not accept me, which was probably smart on their part. But Reddit and some other companies came out of that first round, and I just, wanted to. I was already kind of invested in this experiment, which now Y Combinator has Reddit and Airbnb and Dropbox, and it's sort of this model for accelerators or incubators or whatever you're going to call it. But at the time it was like, this had never been done to have an incubator that was only giving out like $10,000, $20,000,
Right. Exactly.
and sticking people in an apartment in Cambridge and hoping they come up with a great company. So I was just interested to see what came out, and then as soon as I saw Reddit, I was basically hooked.
What was the pitch for Reddit at that time? Because it's very different now.
No, it is very, very different. So, I mean, at that time, when Reddit first launched in 2005, summer 2005, it was just links that you could vote on. There was no comments, there was no sections, it was just links up, down, there was no self-text. So as soon as I saw that, I was just hooked. Right?
Why?
I don't know.
Just
it
links.
was, yeah, but it was, so I was,
So there was no real community at the time.
no, there was no, I mean, there was no real community.
Okay.
I don't know, it was just something, it turned over so quickly, like
Yeah.
every day, even like when I checked in the morning, it was different than when I checked in the afternoon. It was a good variety of stuff. I'm not a programmer, but there was a lot of kind of like interesting things sort of tangentially about programming that I found fascinating. And then, once they added comments, like, I don't know, a few months later, then it started to get really interesting.
Wow.
Then I was just spending like all day on it. I got to know the Alexis and Steve, the co-founders, and then, wound up working for them.
Wow. So the vision early on wasn't necessarily to be social, but to create an environment where people can come and just kind of get news and take it and leave. So how then, I mean, that was a while ago, and now you guys are just, you've blown up. You've grown up and you've blown up. What's the vision today? And I'm really interested in knowing some of the kind of the obstacles to achieving that vision, because as great as you are, there are things that are kind of in your way to going to where you need to be, and I'm kind of interested in.
I mean, so I think the like really abstract vision is pretty similar, and that Reddit is going to tell you, what to pay attention to, right? And Reddit is going to be a place where people can create different communities, whatever those are. And so I think since pretty early on, that's been consistent. Like, the sort of moniker of front page of the internet is something that actually Paul Graham said when they were first pitching the idea of doing a startup. And at that time it seemed kind of ludicrous, like, but okay. And now, arguably you can call it that with a straight face.
Exactly.
But it's this community of different communities that are all somewhat overlapping in some parts and somewhat connected in some parts, but it's still very loose, it's still very free, it's very flexible. It's like IRC, it's like message boards used to be, it's like Usenet used to be for the old folks like me in the crowd.
But why do you think young people, because apparently I know you guys know this, young folks are not in social media the way the older ones are. They're not on Facebook as much, teenagers, they're not in Twitter as much, they're Snapchat, they're Reddit. Why? What is it about Reddit that the other networks don't have? Because the adults are there too, the old ones.
Well, I think that's part of it. I mean, I don't know. I think Reddit is, what gets people hooked on Reddit is when something sort of unpredictable or unexpected happens.
Right. Serendipitous.
Right, and so if I go on Facebook, which I do every day, and to catch up with my friends and see what's going on, but I know exactly what I'm going to see.
No, you know what? That's true.
There's a couple friends that are going to share political stuff. There's a couple friends that are going to share baby pictures. There's going to be something from my friend's mom.
The recipe and photos.
And basic. Twitter's a little more dynamic, but on Reddit, like, you have no idea what you're going to see.
Yeah, but that's a little scary.
Right. But that's why it's interesting.
Okay.
And I think that's why IRC was interesting. That's why Usenet was interesting.
But does that
because you don't know what you're going to find.
But does that make it then, and this will lead to our panel, does that make it a breeding ground more so for negative viral media than the other networks?
It makes it just makes it more of a breeding ground. Stop.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
It's like, I think of Reddit and Twitter and some of those other things in the ecosystem, like an estuary or like a wetlands. It's this area where you have different, it's very like nutrient, rich, if we're extending the metaphor. There's all kinds of little animals and critters and fish swimming around. There's fresh water, there's salt water, there's mud and marsh, and there's all these things, but that's where something new's created, right? You don't create something new out in the middle of the
you don't just go from like, you don't just drop like a killer whale, right?
Right.
You have to have these little organisms and
Ecosystem.
critters, and
Right.
somewhere out of that mess comes something new.
Right.
You can't just create something new out of sort of a more stale environment. So, yeah, no, it does have the potential for serious things, negative things, but I think if and there's definitely things that can be done to cultivate that, or
Yeah.
to limit that, or
But
shape
that's what you
it.
do. That's what you
Yeah.
do. How do you do that though, without pissing off the community?
You have to have so Reddit has 25 employees. So
That's it?
5 billion page views per month, 25 employees. So,
Wow.
so whether it's Reddit specifically or just a company like Reddit that has that much traffic, and basically a skeleton crew, you're going to have your users do most of the work. Right? And Reddit, Reddit is, at all successful, it's because the users are, collectively amazing and smart and creative and funny and all that good stuff, right? And they also do most of the sort of moderating and policing on the site. So if you want the users to do all of the work, in terms of moderation and sort of cultivating communities, then you have to, basically have a very small number of rules.
Right.
Because the rules, if you have a long list of rules, then you're gonna have a hard time having the same rules for the NFL subreddit
Right.
as you do for the, even like the Harry Potter subreddit, right?
Right.
The NFL doesn't have spoilers,
Right.
But the Breaking Bad subreddit does, so
Yeah.
that's a
allowed.
small example. But you're gonna have to have a very small number of rules that can be, for the most part, self-policed, right? And we're talking self-policed across, whatever, 200 countries in the world,
Right.
people who are 16 and people who are 60,
70,
all
yeah.
different kinds of communities.
Right.
So that, and people can say like we didn't pick the right rules, or we're not enforcing them right, or anything like that. But like I think it's hard to argue that you should have like a list of 100 rules, because then you can't have a site with a very small number of people
Right.
and all this
That's the
traffic
way it
and all these people doing their own things.
Right. That's fantastic. What keeps you up at night about Reddit? What concerns you? Because you see a lot of, I'm sure, you see a lot of things, and you've been in the news a lot, specifically recently in regards to Boston and things that kind of, they don't represent the whole community and how people think, but I'm sure it's made you look differently at how communities form and how people react.
Yeah, I mean, what keeps me up at night, and I've gotten slightly better at not staying awake at all hours, but it's just real people. So someone posts a suicide threat, someone says something about taking guns to school, someone says something about someone else, that kind of the media attention, that kind of stuff doesn't keep me awake, as same as like, oh, if maybe we can do something that'll improve or prevent something from happening to one specific person.
Wow, that's right. That's rough. Because you can't always do that.
Yeah, it's kind of, but there are things.
Does that drive you though? I would think that would drive you because of the fact that you can't do it and you seem to want to do it, to continue to do it for the people and to kind of
Yeah, I mean, to be able to have an impact on someone's real life is pretty powerful.
That it is. So we're gonna thank you so much. I took you all night. Okay, we're gonna just kind of get the panel started. We're gonna talk about topical, negative, viral media things that have happened. I'm gonna start getting your questions. You okay? Okay. I'm gonna start getting your questions. Aren't they awesome? Seriously, I mean, kick ass. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to torture you. Okay, so I almost don't know where to start because with regard to viral media, I don't even know if we have like a really good definition of it. We all know intuitively what it is, but I would really like to know how you define in each of your respective, like your areas, how you're defining something that goes viral. Like viral media in general, is it a certain number of hits? Is it a certain, like, what is it?
I mean, I guess for us it's something that if you're, it's something that's either people can participate in. You know, so most of the memes are that way. The ones that really explode are ones that people can add their own, you know, wrinkle to, or their own remix, or something that's debatable. So right now the biggest sort of viral thing on Reddit is this tea kettle.
Yes.
From JCPenney.
Does everyone know this?
That may or may not look like Hitler, right?
Can you tell them what that is?
So yeah, so there's a billboard. I don't even remember where the billboard was, but it's a JCPenney billboard, and it's a tea kettle. And if you look at the tea kettle and you squint a little bit and use your imagination, it kind of may look like the outline of Hitler, right? with the hair, and the mustache, and the spout is the arm. Like it's there if you're looking for it. But I mean that one like is debatable because you can bring it up with 5 people and maybe 3 of them will be like, oh yeah, I see it, and the other one will be like, what are you talking about?
But don't you think that's why people do that? It's a snow news day, and it's kind of like
it's you know you're not if they like let's just imagine JCPenney actually made a tea kettle that clearly looked like Adolf Hitler.
Right.
Like that wouldn't be the same. I mean that would probably be talked about in the news, but not in the same way. This is like it's interesting because it's not. You know, it's not
ridiculous.
Well, and because it's not super clear.
Right.
Right. Because you can.
So in other words, we like the ambiguity so that we can figure it out.
Right. And you know, the news can talk about it and say like, do you see it? I don't see it. You know, one anchor sees it, one anchor doesn't.
There were so many debates on it. Jonah, how do you using this as an example too? Because you're in academia, which is fascinating to me because you know how you define things for this generation coming up is completely different than how we necessarily see it. So how are you defining viral media for your students?
I think so. A lot of times people like to put a number on it, right? So something viral that has 1 million views, 100,000 views. I don't think that number is very interesting because then what does it say? Something right below that number isn't, and something above that number is. I think to me what's more interesting is the rate of transmission. Right? So just like a batting average in baseball, sometimes you're up, you're more likely to get a hit. You can think about the viral coefficient. Something is more likely to spread from person to person.
Okay.
And so thinking about what gets that rate up versus doesn't. So, you know, in this case, and we've done some work on controversy, looking at how controversy changes the likelihood of sharing something. And so to me, at least, I think something more interesting to talk about, more or less viral, more or less contagious, more or less talkable, rather than setting some arbitrary threshold, which doesn't really help very much.
Wow. Okay, that makes sense. But are they getting that though? Are they accepting that as the definition of viral media, or do they look at it differently because they're from a different generation?
I mean, I think so. I don't know who the they is there.
Well, your students. I'm sorry, your students.
But I mean, again, the idea is the why. I think is the more interesting. Than so, you know, what is a meme? Right? Like some people say, well, a meme is this, and other people say, well, that's not really an interesting conversation. Actually, it's more interesting is let's study why these things spread and what makes someone decide to share the teacup Hitler picture or not share that or share something else, and what are the characteristics of those things, just like characteristics of diseases, that make them more likely to be
Right, which brings me to my next question. Why did the Hitler tea kettle go viral? I think it was just because it's a slow news day and people were just kind of like, but there's more of an explanation.
Well, I think, so to the point, I mean, I think things that allow us to, controversy, we've done some work on controversy. Controversy does 2 things. Makes things more interesting, it also makes them more uncomfortable. Right? And so controversy always makes things more interesting, but depending on who you're talking to, if you're talking to your friend, it's not so uncomfortable because they know you well, whereas you're talking to a stranger, it's more uncomfortable. Anonymous, less uncomfortable because no one can see who you are. So I think these things that allow for debate, allow for back and forth, if there's an answer, what's the discussion? Right? Well, we all agree. Right? If there's a debate, oh, they shouldn't have made that draft pick, right? Sports people argue about that forever. This is the same sort of thing. We can argue, did JCPenney do this or not? What does it mean? Is it or not?
Hitler?
And which is a great way for people to pass the time during the day.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Now, the interesting thing about this, and I'm going to start getting questions from you guys, is the response of JCPenney was almost more outrageous than the actual because, you know, listen, I feel for brands. I've worked in marketing for years. I get it. You know, they're trying to figure it out just as much as we are. I mean, there could be quite a few of you in here right now who are trying to figure out, oh, how do I make my brand stronger? JCPenney's response was to kind of sort of make light of it, right? They actually
they took the billboard down.
They took it down. Well, yeah, they did take it down. But I mean, they sent out a series of tweets to try to engage the audience to say, hey guys, come on, it wasn't intentional. If we were going to do something intentional, we would have done a tea kettle snowman, and then they showed us tea kettle snowman, and it was just a little awkward, it's like a joke that goes bad and everyone's kind of silent and like, you know. But this comes to you, Michael, because again, with regard to brands who get sucked into a negative viral media kind of vortex, it can be like having cold water thrown in your face and expecting to respond exactly, you know, with poise immediately. What should they have done after that? Like, how should they respond to recover? Well, that would have made everyone happy. I don't know if that's possible.
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing to acknowledge is that there are a lot of different categories of things that go viral. And they often do, and I think Jonah touched on this a little bit, it speaks a little bit to what sort of interaction we're each having with them. You know, you take the Hitler thing, for example. My opinion on the matter is that there have been a series of Hitler, Nazi-related, you know, imagery things over the years, and some of them have taken off. There was the cat, the house, the apartment complex, there were a few others. And they had different sort of spikes. And so what people remember from that thing is, hey, there was an incident, there was a water cooler discussion that came up about it, and I get to participate in this, so I'm going to throw my chips on the table and see if it takes off enough that I can be part of an interesting conversation, online or offline. Now, when it comes to what a company should do about it, they really have to look at what is the symptom and treat that, not the disease. Now, in the case of the Hitler thing, you've got, you know, you could have immediately sort of done a more sincere sort of apology thing and then pivot away from it, which is always a better tactic. But there are some cases where you do the right thing and it just explodes in your face. There's plenty of examples of that have come up over the years. What's another type of question is when you have an entirely different kind of category of negative, where you've, I'm trying to remember who the company was. There was a company who, DKNY a few years ago, some photographer in New York posted something that said, you've put unlicensed pictures of that I took, that I own, in one of your storefronts in a foreign country, Thailand, I think it might have been. And I want you to donate $10,000 to the YMCA and apologize. So the company said, this is a great opportunity. We're going to donate $25,000 to the YMCA, and we are going to apologize. And it was a disaster of epic proportions, because what happened is, because they upped the ante and said, okay, you asked for 10, we'll give you 25. The backlash against that was horrible, where people said, well, why didn't you give 100? And they couldn't get away from it. And they had caused it because they had upped the ante themselves. So you have to be careful about, really be precise in your answer.
So brands would come to you, and brands do come to you then in this situation, and they say, or the PR firms come to you and they say, we have this, what would they say in this situation? I mean,
yeah, a reputation management company would have two roles in this. One would be mopping up after the fact. So the reputation's been decimated. This is what people remember, and we'll help rebuild after the fact. The other thing is we have a crisis management program where we, you know, build a lot of different types of content, and we sort of stage it, and then we release it in order to try to shift the conversation away. And that's a common PR tactic as well. You apologize, you don't mess around with it, and then you try to move on as quickly as you can.
Okay. And I'll tell you what's interesting. I would think that brands would be trying to work with Reddit in some way, even though it would be a little scary, right? Because Reddit is kind of like the wild, wild, you know, you have to be careful. But have they approached Reddit, and have you had a lot of
for the most part, no. They're pretty scared of Reddit, which is just fine with me.
Right.
I mean, I think there's certain examples. You know, I guess more on the brand side, you see it more in the gaming space.
Yeah.
Companies that are sort of popular with our audience will put the little Reddit alien in their game as like an Easter egg somewhere.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun. But I mean, it's scary. But on the other hand, like there was a Cottonelle did something. They bought there was basically a thread on Reddit from someone in another country, basically asking why Americans only use toilet paper.
Okay.
And not wet wipes or bidet or something else, right?
Okay.
And so Cottonelle kind of responded to that by taking out an ad on Reddit, and they gave away like 5,000 of their wet wipes.
Wow.
To people, and that people were totally okay with that. Like,
that's scary. I'm sorry. Oh, Jesus. Okay, go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, it was very straightforward. They weren't trying to be, super. They weren't trying to be too clever or cute about it.
Right.
I mean, usually when brands try to do stuff on Reddit, they try to be funny, and they try to use memes, and I don't know. Brands generally aren't funny.
No.
And the worst thing is when they are trying too hard or trying to, sort of pander to an audience.
Yeah. We're going to get more into that as well. I'm going to take 1 or 2 questions and then come back to some other examples. And Jonah, I really want to get your feedback on other things. No, that's fine.
That's okay. Yeah, really it's cooler with the.
Yeah, without it, I felt like I was blinding you. I'm going to get your feedback on the psychology of people creating and sharing, because there is a difference, right? Creating viral media that's knowingly negative. I go to YouTube and I see a whole lot of stuff. I see fist fights, and you can hear the people behind the camera say, oh, this is going on YouTube, everyone kind of, and then there's the people who share it, who maybe just lurk with. So I would love to know what you think of that. But question.
With the panel's opinion, whether any of this stuff is controllable anymore. I'll just say my opinion is it's not. Basically, with so many people online, with so many people with the tools to create and share stuff, short of pulling the plug, you can't really control. You could perhaps influence, but not control. Agree, disagree?
I mean, I think I generally agree with you. I think the language of shifting the discussion, and I think you would say that's different than controlling the discussion, but that hasn't changed. I mean, it's not like before the internet there wasn't negative word of mouth, and I think some companies think, oh, well, if I just sort of close my ears and we're not doing word of mouth marketing, we're not working with the reputation front, then it's not going to happen. And just because the internet happened, or just because you're doing, that doesn't change anything. I think you can try to influence the discussion, you can try to shape the discussion or move the discussion, but you can never decide what everyone's going to say. You can try to influence it in a positive way. That's the best I think you can do.
Another question?
This is a question about Reddit. It's a bit of a two-parter. So I'm wondering, what's your relationship with the media in terms of like BuzzFeed or Berger kind of shamelessly pulling content from the site and helping it maybe go viral more so outside of Reddit? Like, do you care either way whether or not that occurs? And do you feel like there's a threshold for a brand to nip something before it ends up spreading outside of Reddit?
Sure. So yeah, the first one was about, I don't know if everyone, it was about how do we feel about BuzzFeed, Gawker, other places sort of taking sort of content on Reddit, repackaging a little bit, and then helping. I think it's great. I think it's like SportsCenter, right? Like we're the NBA and they're SportsCenter and they're showing the highlights, and there's some people that only want to see the highlights and the dunk and the final score, and that's fine, right? But there are a lot of other people that after watching the highlights are going to come and want to watch the actual game and maybe even participate, right? And I think that's great. So I look at them as more of like a gateway drug than a competitor, or then the only thing that makes me mad is when people sort of use, and I get mad with things that aren't Reddit, but when they do it poorly. So when like not to name any names, but Huffington Post and used to screenshot comments and put them in a slideshow. Like that makes me mad, not because they're like stealing our content, but just because it looks like crap. Yeah. So I mean, I don't think any sort of repackaging or aggregating or whatever, and Reddit does it to other sites and other things too. I don't think it's inherently good or bad, but it can be done poorly. But yeah, in general, I think those things have helped, spread Reddit. So yeah, and the other one was
the threshold where a brand can actually salvage something that goes negative before it.
Yeah, I think in general, there's so little sort of sincerity and transparency. And I know this isn't possible for especially some of the bigger brands, but when brands can actually, own up to a mistake and just say like, we screwed up, and then try to fix it, then I think that goes a really long way, and that can kind of, take the edge off some of the anger.
Michael, do you think that's part of the reason why the tea kettles, by the way, sold out in record time? Like Nobody's hurting from that. And so do you think that because JCPenney actually engaged, you know, the audience and was like, hey, we're sorry, do you think that that actually helped them to sell? In other words, if they had just ignored it and said, we're not going to be bothered, or if they had handled it poorly, would they have been able to sell those decals?
Yeah, I mean, ignoring it's a pretty risky bet because you're gambling that it's not going to take off exponentially, that it's going to peter out pretty quickly. And the worst part is that if you don't react and it does go exponential on you, people interpret the worst of your motives, you know, that you were intentionally trying to cover up, or, you know, it was malicious intent or something like that. And I think one of the interesting things we see with brands is that this enormous disconnect within major brands between the rest of the company and the people running some of their, you know, online outreach. I mean, I've seen brands where it seems like the youngest, you know, worst paid person in the entire company is running their entire social media program by themselves, and nobody with a director in front of their name or above will even talk to them. And then the CEO of the company gets this, you know, like everything's on fire. How did this possibly happen? And this poor kid is stuck holding the bag. And we have these conversations with brands all the time.
Wow. Why aren't they getting that? It seems like such a, like a 101.
It's because most organizations, you know, just don't take the internet seriously. I do a lot of media. Most of the media doesn't understand the internet. They're not really into it. It's amazing how many people come from writing backgrounds that are online media and don't even use the internet themselves. The divide, if you excuse the improper use of this expression, but the digital divide among the kind of technorati of the internet and those that are sort of dragged along is enormous and getting worse.
Having said that, let's segue into our next discussion about average people who get caught in negative viral. I mean, these are brands, right? They have millions of dollars. Yeah, they have money to fix. What about, Jonah, the average person who, and I'll give an example. This is probably a bad example, but last year there was that McDonald's fight. You know, there's always a fight in a fast food place that blows up, and the people involved are kind of put on blast. And I don't know. You could be doing anything today. You could be walking down the street and trip, and someone could film that and just or video record that and put it online, and it can go viral. You know, it seems as if we have less and less, I don't want to say control, but there certainly is a concern. I don't know if you guys feel this, I'll ask this of you. Do you have some sort of concern of any kind about the potential for something that you've done or said getting out there online in a negative way? How many people have that concern realistically? Let's see, I gotta tell you. Your hand didn't go up. Get that hand up. Why not? He's mine.
I think that we're all worried about those sorts of things, just like we're all worried about, oh, Big Brother's collecting all our data, and one day something is going to happen with that. I think if you looked at the number of people that has actually happened to, the number of hands would be much fewer that have actually gone up. And that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and that doesn't mean it doesn't happen to anyone, but I think the concern is much bigger sometimes than what actually occurs. And so, yeah, go ahead.
I'll dissent when you're ready.
Okay.
Let me know when you're ready.
And so I at least personally am not heavily concerned about that. I also think you know, that there's a lot of interest then to you, and we've done some work with negative publicity, for example, and we find that you know, there's that old adage, any publicity is good publicity, and that's wrong. Right? So negative publicity about something that's well known already actually hurts. So a New York Times book review, for example, it's a negative review about a book that's already pretty popular, hurts sales. But if an unknown, it actually helps because it brings awareness to that thing. So if you look at, you know, the Elliot Spitzer scandal, for example. So there was Elliot Spitzer, and there was, what's her name? We don't remember anymore, right?
The prostitute.
Number 9.
Yes.
Ashley.
Yeah, Ashley Dupree.
Right.
And Ashley Dupree went from someone that no one knew to someone whose song sold a pretty good amount on iTunes after that negative news. And so I'm not.
Are you saying she benefited from it? Are you saying
I'm
that
saying
in the
she
end?
definitely benefited.
Well, she did benefit from it, but in the long run, did she? Will she always be known as a hooker? I mean, did she get to outlive that moment in time?
I think if we compared her prior trajectory to where she is now, and I don't know where she is now, but I imagine in the long run she's potentially benefited from this. But I think more generally, I'm not personally as worried about these sort of things, but I think they are important. Sure. And I think if they affect you, right, if you know that this is happening to you, it's very important to try to fix. I'm not as worried about the potential of it happening. I would be more worried if it happens, how to fix it.
Right.
Hopefully that reduced the dissent a little bit.
No.
Let's go. I would like to speak because
what I was going to say is I think the numbers of this are gargantuan and growing every day. And there are people in this room right now who have friends or relatives who are damaged online because of something they've done or something that someone's done to them or something that someone with a similar name has done. And we see the worst horror stories you've ever seen. I can't go anywhere.
You told me a few.
I can't go anywhere and have this conversation. Every single time I do like a TV interview, the guy or the person interviewing me beforehand says, hey, before we go on air, by the way, this used to happen to me. I got drugged, these pictures are up. We've got, you wouldn't believe, my 14-year-old daughter's here with me, so I always find a way to plug this. You would not believe, McKella, how many people regret pictures of themselves that they once agreed to take.
You do, right?
You would have, we have not one, not two, we have 3 clients who are former Playgirl models. Playgirl models, forget the Playboy models. All real businessmen with kids and stuff today deeply regret these pictures. But it goes on. Mug shots, it goes on and on and on and on. And the attacks and the negativity. I don't want to give you the wrong impression. The internet is wonderful and it's the greatest invention we've ever come up with. But there's a dark side to it, and every tool can be used as a weapon. And it's happening to millions and millions of people right now.
Is this the airplane effect? Where, a plane crashes and kills everyone on board once every several years, but, realistically the chances of us dying in a plane crash, I don't know the statistics, are like next to none, but we fear going up, or we fear that it's kind of unrealistic. Are we creating a culture of fear based on viral media? Is viral media creating a culture of fear in us that is unhealthy, especially considering Google Glasses, which is going to allow us to take footage very discreetly, and our cell phones, which you said yourself is the numbers are growing. Are we creating a culture of fear?
I mean, it can't be that scary because no one's changing their behavior. So
yeah, but human beings are. No, I'm not saying that they should.
Yeah.
But.
I think in very soon we're going to have we already had a senator who was a Playgirl model, right? So very soon we're going to have a president or somebody who has pictures of them doing keg stands on Facebook.
Is that not going to be? No, you're right.
It's not going to be a big deal.
At
least to people under a certain age.
Let me ask you then. What's his name? This is a great lead into him. Wiener, who is now, how could I forget? Who is now running for? Well, he hasn't announced or anything, but he's thinking of doing it. He has? Yes. He's embarrassing. He's definitely okay. Will he be the one?
I mean, that's a little different than having drunk pictures on Facebook.
Not very. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think things like that are going to be less and less incendiary because,
it's going to become more ubiquitous.
Because everyone's going to have pictures of them drunk somewhere on the internet, or whatever the equivalent is.
No, you're right. Are we more? I'm wondering because. How many of you in here would actually, and this is going into politics, I don't really want to get into that, but do you think Wiener should run? Do you think that he should? How many people say yes? I'm just curious. Be honest. Okay.
I would even vote for him.
You would vote for him?
For what?
Why?
Because when he was in the Congress, he really kicked ass.
Anybody else there. He is not us. He is the same.
Okay. Okay.
Is everybody?
Do you get politicians coming in?
Yeah, we have quite a bit of politicians from a lot of different countries.
So going into what causes, because that's a whole nother ballgame. The celebrity angle and the politician angle is really interesting because a lot of times people do things to kind of create negative viral media to profit off of it, right? So with Wiener, you had Breitbart. That's how it started, right? Breitbart had the photos and put it up on Twitter and everything, and it blew up. I'll tell you something, and I'll ask you this question. When we share viral video, we have all shared negative viral video in here. Would you agree with that? When I say negative, I mean something that actually has a negative impact on someone else's life just by the action of you sharing it. Would you say we've all done that in here?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Okay.
What would everybody's advice be to Wiener from everybody's perspective? How would you handle it if he was your clients?
Well, okay, from my perspective, you know, unfortunately, like the prostitute we mentioned before, you know, some people's problems, the problem comes up when your problem is bigger than your wallet, then you're kind of stuck with it. Now, in the case of Wiener, I mean, what are his options, right? He can't drop off into obscurity. The retirement plans for former congressmen are not as good as it might sound. So he's got to hope that, you know, to your point earlier, that you know, the acceptance of these things, that he can get past them and push through, and his family's trying to help him with that.
But will society let him? Well, do you think that he'll be able to? I guess that's where you come in terms of how people's behavior, how what we do online affects how we react in the real world. I mean, it seems to be a blurring of lines more, right? Which I think is what makes it so scary. And I actually do want to talk about the Boston thing, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, okay. Well, first I think unfortunately the retirement plans for former congressmen are actually pretty lucrative. Yeah. With lobbying and whatnot. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think if I mean, he's already been, you know, sort of stripped of any dignity. So you might as well take that as a chance to actually be sincere and say things that everyone else is afraid to. I don't know if that's, I know nothing about it. I don't know if he's, you know, wanting or capable of doing that. But
I will say this, that's a good point. I will say this, I saw him on the streets about 2 years ago, and going back to the behavior where this is kind of a mirror on us, and that we all perpetuate this negative viral media without understanding the effects or even caring when we see it. You know, I saw him in the streets with his wife and his child, and they were doing what every husband, wife, child do, and so they were walking quite lovely, except that they were very aware that people were watching them. And it made me uncomfortable, but it also made me want to take out my phone and take a photo. Which is, I have to be honest with you. And I did. And I considered tweeting it. I'm just gonna, that's my confession for the night. That's it. I did consider tweeting, and I didn't because the picture was too blurry. But what was it that I was tweeting? And I'm gonna ask you this question. I'll be honest with you. That moment that I was trying to capture, to share with people that I don't even know online, didn't have to do so much with, here's the pervert who now he's with his child. It had to do with the fact that he was uncomfortable, clearly, and that they were just trying to have this moment that everyone was encroaching on, including me. I don't know. So anyway, I didn't put it up there, but I don't know if he'll run, but let's hope.
You probably would have done him a favor if you had.
You think? Why?
Yeah, well, because that sort of human kind of view is exactly sort of shifting in his image that he needs, right?
I felt bad for him. At the same time that I was exploiting him, which is odd. Which is odd. It is what it is.
I did see that he has a campaign video. I mean, I'm not going out to look for this, it's just what I saw a reference.
What are you, his agent? You feel like you're going to vote for him? You have this video? What's going on here?
It's in the news.
Why you don't compare him with Clinton? Clinton has more money, and he is not uncomfortable about anything.
Clinton is a whole different ball.
It's the same.
It may be, but we're not going to get on Clinton. But I understand. I'm just, he's actually, I'm sorry?
Why are we talking about Wiener?
Because he's running for mayor in New York.
I think there's a hand back there, actually.
So I'm curious about, I think this is a very American issue, and I'm wondering if like this leads to some sort of numbing effect, because I remember the stories with, I forget his name, with the French guy with the IMF. When he was caught, it was a big deal here, but all of France was just kind of shocked at the American outrage and like, well, he's doing his job.
Right.
Which kind of goes back to not his job in doing something potentially illegal, but that's his private life. His job is strictly related to IMF, and that's all we care about. So, curious if like all this negative media like gets to, for lack of a better term, a tipping point where we see, okay, we don't really care anymore. Wiener, he's just going to be a politician.
He's going to be there.
Whatever scandal he's had, we're just going to rush out of there. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm curious.
I mean, I would just say there are definitely cultural meanings of actions, right? Like what something means in one culture may mean something different in another culture based on the expectations and norms and prior behavior of folks in that culture. I'm not well versed in French culture, but you know, something that is or is not controversial, surprising, weird here may be fine there, and vice versa. And so I think it's about people's expectations of politicians. I mean, I hold a little bit more towards the model you just suggested of, is someone doing a good job? Now, if they're killing people in their spare time, that's relevant. But at what point do we draw the line? And that sort of depends on personal opinion, I think.
Are you doing any research in the near future on viral media culturally, worldwide, in terms of comparing how different cultures kind of process the viral media? Because it is a little different. I mean, how they look at it, is that possible?
We haven't done a lot of stuff on culture. So I've done a little bit on culture and choice, right? So how our cultural background affects the types of things we choose, but not much in the viral media space.
And how do we process or deal with controversy online differently than in the real world? Do we go online and kind of rip open our shirts and become bolder and more involved in controversy online than in the real world? Yeah, just in terms of your research.
The work we've done shows, I mean, and I don't think this is rocket science, but when we're anonymous, or when we're hiding behind an online identity that doesn't necessarily have to be our true identity, that discomfort goes down, right? Because no one can attribute that behavior to our true identity, and so we're much more comfortable. That interesting fact that controversy has, we're much more comfortable stepping further out on the controversy plane because it's not going to be tracked back to us. If I'm on my Facebook page compared to if I'm an anonymous identity, I'm going to be less likely to share that controversial thing because I'm worried how people are going to see me based on that.
Okay. I'm just gonna switch it to Boston for a minute, because the Boston situation where a family was going through a horrible situation at the same time that the bombings happened, and their son was missing and was wrongly accused of being one of the bombers, and it was a difficult time for everyone. I mean, even I can imagine for you too. I mean, my heart went out to everyone in that situation. Those are real people who didn't ask for that and who were already aching and unfortunately had to go through additional, I read an article, I don't know if you know this, but Erik apologized for your community kind of falsely, although not intentionally, but they did falsely kind of perpetuate that rumor that unfortunately was not true. Anyway, you apologized.
Yeah.
I would like to know, was there a struggle in whether or not you should apologize, being you're on behalf of the company, because you do have to represent the company, but also the community, and was there a struggle there, and whether or not you should apologize for what the community did?
No, I mean, because just the way we work, like anytime anything happens, we're gonna sort of do a review of it, or a post-mortem or whatever. When our a few years ago, our servers used to go down all the time, and we would do like lengthy, like super detailed blog posts about it that I don't understand because I'm not an engineer, but the detail. Okay, this is why the site was down for 12 hours on a day, and so. Or when Obama came on and did the AMA, we went into a lot of depth about here's where the site ran into problems, here's some really good stuff. So like it's just kind of in our nature to analyze things after they happen, whether it's good or whether it's bad. So there was never a question of this is a big event for us, and a lot of people were watching Reddit, and I think kind of back to what makes things viral or interesting online is that the outcome was unclear. Right. Are these not just Reddit, but 4chan and Twitter? Are the FBI asked for people's help?
And they
is the online community? People are they going to contribute? Are they going to make it worse? Are they going to falsely accuse someone, which ended up happening?
Well, that's why this is when viral media goes wrong too, because the best of intentions can lead to the worst of outcomes, and it's easy to do with technology.
Yeah, so it was never. I mean, issuing some sort of follow up was never a question, and then just sort of like personally as a company, it was never a question of like, is it the right thing to apologize to the family, which we did, both privately right away and then publicly later.
How did they take it?
They were amazed. Like they were like inhumanly just amazing and kind, and yeah, they were. I could not imagine. Isn't that your moment that you were looking for? Isn't it the moment that you were telling me where you? I mean, not that you're necessarily changing them for the better, but you do get to kind of feel that human touch of your network having an effect, a real effect
negative at first, but then you changed it into something very positive because his family lost their son and they went through this horrible thing, but then you redeem, I would think it would be somewhat redeeming for them that you cared and tried to make it right.
I mean, I hope other people watching, learn from it.
What about the community? Do you think the community might learn from it?
I mean, I think broadly speaking, like I hope the community, and not just the community on Reddit, but media and everyone following along on Twitter and listening to police scanners and all these things, hopefully saw like what can happen if.
But should there be, this is a question for the panel and for you guys, should there be accountability in social media, online, for what we do when it's wrong, when it's clearly wrong in this case and it causes harm and possibly irreparable damage? Should there be some kind of accountability? Should the platforms should you have held the community somewhat responsible and said, hey guys, we can't have this, what do you think? And I want to get all of you.
Who are we starting with?
I mean, is the lack of accountability what makes viral media so contagious as well?
I think the environment, the ecosystem metaphor earlier actually applies here. One of the points I made in one of my slides is that there are, kind of different flavors of stuff out there. And Reddit has a culture and a set of values and a way of monitoring itself. And I think it attempts to be, pretty clear about how it does that. Wikipedia has another one. Twitter has another one. And I think what's missing from the equation is, we as people, as consumers of this, haven't properly been sort of trained or attuned to this well enough so we can discern them properly, right? So that if something, if CNN gets something wrong, it's different than if Reddit gets it wrong.
Right.
It's different than if Wikipedia gets it wrong, right? And I'm not saying one's better or worse, but the world needs different levels of anarchy. I use the word anarchy in my conversation. It wasn't meant to be a negative. That's what's great about the internet. That's what I love about the internet, is the anarchy. We need different flavors of it, but you got to know what you're getting yourself into, and the authoritativeness of that source is something that people need to consider.
I just make one
Actually, let me hold off on you. I just want to get some other people. Can we get in the back? I'll come back.
But today we had Facebook publicly say that they're no longer going to accept images of rape against women or battered women, whatever it might be. And that's a direct result of groups contacting them and saying, we're not going to use your service, this is unacceptable for you to do this. So it's kind of like the community monitoring itself almost, because everyone's on Facebook, those people are all part of the community. So do you guys think that the responsibility and onus is still for the most part on the users of whatever the social network form might be, as opposed to the actual moderators, or, like in this case of Reddit, like the employees saying, we're going to monitor the actions of our people, or if it's Twitter saying, if XYZ words are said, we're going to ban it. Do you guys think it's more on the population to monitor themselves, or the higher-ups in whatever organization might be?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely on the population or the community. That's not to say that we can't always do better as sort of the groundskeepers and cultivators and whatever metaphor you want to use, but like, the really amazing things that have come out of Reddit or come out of Twitter or any of those other things came from the community. So why shouldn't the sort of, appropriate and positive, whatever, standards or norms or rules or morals, why shouldn't that also come out of the community? And that's a very messy process, and what's okay in one community is not okay in another. But I think that, the idea that like any group of individuals could sort of do that better than the collective communities is, I think that's wishful thinking. Yeah.
You trust your community?
Yeah, not that like these different communities are gonna get everything right all the time, but in general, yeah, I believe that. Reddit wouldn't work if most of the people weren't, using it with good intentions. Wikipedia wouldn't work if 9% of the people using it were using it the way it was meant to, right? We have gift exchanges on Reddit where 60,000 people around the world give each other their home addresses and send gifts to each other, to complete strangers. Like, that wouldn't work if even 10% of the people were doing it to try to screw it up. Like, most of the things online work because most of the people are pretty good.
Wow. You agree, Jonah? You're shaking your head. What are you seeing from the young? It's interesting. I always come back to the college kids because again, you know, I'm old media and everything, or traditional media. How are they viewing viral media or media differently than, you know, us in this room? I mean, are you hearing anything from them? I know that they hold privacy a little differently than we do. They seem to be more protective of their privacy. Are you seeing anything different here?
I'm going to pass on that one. I don't know that I know. Maybe the folks in this room are probably better and ready to address that than me. I mean, I'm not sure.
He'll tell you in his workshop. Has to answer that. Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. That's going to be over here.
Well, him, but I'll come to you next. Okay. I promise.
Yeah, I have a question about anonymity. For example, people tweeting, etc., or posting or blogging, etc. And they think they're anonymous, and they're doing it from a cell phone, yet they can be traced. You have one user per cell phone. Have you seen incidents where people's, I'd say perhaps post something outrageous, or something that's, you know, really crazy, or something out there, or threatening? Have you seen incidents, or is that a point where that person's reputation, they thought it was pretty much anonymous, but it isn't anonymous? Have you seen cases like that where they've sort of been outed, I guess, for being anonymous?
Yeah,
To that point?
I think it's addressed to me that, sorry?
The Boston Bombers, we're not so anonymous after all, were they?
No, I mean, I'll actually give a similar example to one was given earlier. I used to be the COO of Cha-Cha, and similar to what was said earlier about Reddit, Cha-Cha had standard processes for what we would do if somebody would ask, you know, how do I get a gun into the White House or whatever, right? We had a local Secret Service contacts, and it was a regular kind of rhythm of the day sort of thing, right? So there is a lot of anonymity on the web. The question is whether or not you do something outrageous enough that warrants somebody with the means and influence to actually try to find you. And that happens in a very, very tiny portion of the cases. And that's why it tends to happen with Al-Qaeda and with, you know, Secret Service concerns, but it doesn't happen with, you know, the Yelp reviewer who says, I found a rat in my soup.
Right. Or even with, what's her name, the one who Donglegate, Audrey, a couple of months ago.
Richards.
Audrey Richards. There's a young woman by the name of Audrey Richards, a coder. She herself actually perpetuated a photo from a conference. She was offended that, does everyone know, she was offended. This is a case where, you know her, okay. This is a great case for, I don't know if you know this, but she was offended by two men in the back who were making jokes about, you know, penis jokes behind her, and this was at a conference, and she felt like, well, this is unacceptable. Rather than turn around and address them, she took a photo of them and she tweeted it on Twitter to her thousands of followers. It instantly like went viral, right? Because it was just, I don't know, her comment was a chastisement. But these two guys who were just, you know, fine, they may have been making jokes that were inappropriate, but now their employers, their families, everyone sees that, you know, and one of them lost their jobs and she lost her job. It turned into a huge thing. And this is what fascinates me about your research and about what you know, we should know better, okay? She is someone who's a tech, she's a developer. She should know that tweet would go viral. We would expect that behavior to be at the hands of someone who doesn't know, who is naive about the process, but she works in tech. I don't know, how can something, I shouldn't say how can something like that happen. When something like that happens, and when it causes the ruckus that it did, because it actually tore the community apart, right? It kind of really tore the tech community apart. It was debate, fights. She was threatened. There were rape threats to her and her family. I mean, she was DDoSed. When that happens, she lost her job too. I mean, yeah, this was a big blowout. This was negative viral media at its worst, you know, and it didn't have to happen. So when that happens, what does that say about us? It's almost as if we're in the infancy of viral media, and we're not.
I mean, I think often we don't think about how many people are going to see something that we share. Yeah. I think a good analogy to think of it is if you're in a room full of people, you can look everybody in the eye and you can recognize that we're all here. And I wouldn't say something up here because I can see everybody. Right. But maybe when I'm at home within my computer, sitting on my boxers, just hanging out, I don't see all those people. Yet I'm writing to all of them, and so I'm not thinking about the audience as much. And so that may lead me to share things that I wouldn't share otherwise because I'm not as aware of that audience and its effect that might have in propagating that information. Online is a larger audience, but it feels in some ways like a diary. Sure. You're not actually talking to anyone in particular, just writing your thoughts down, and they're going somewhere. But I don't think we're always physically aware that sort of how many people might see that piece of information.
Do you think we're underestimating or misjudging our behavior because she had a large audience and maybe she felt like it wouldn't go beyond that audience, but it seems like her shock of it and our shock collectively was in how visceral the response was to that media. Are we still kind of not understanding how certain things that we put out there kind of incite anger and passion and make things viral?
And I would just say, I bet if she instead had to stand up on a stage and tell that many people that piece of information, she wouldn't have shared it. And so that sort of proximity of the audience makes us recognize that people are actually hearing this information and may make us change our behavior.
Right. Okay. Interesting. I'm going to put you.
I have a question for Erik Martin from Reddit specifically. And it's about the communities. Keep saying the communities can handle this. And about the Reddit community, I was on Reddit for about 2 years. And first year, some of these communities are so big, with like 3 million subscribers in some of them, and yet the rhetoric is still like, oh, it's this community that can take care of itself, And the second thing is a lot of these are first come, first serve in terms of who's the moderator. It's just someone who is on Reddit. Specifically, you have in the NYC subreddit, there was an allegation a number of months ago, maybe last year, that the moderator was deleting posts, and then people criticized him, and he would delete the posts on them. And I think this was documented, I'm not sure. How do you respond to that? You say it's the communities, but the communities just, can they regulate themselves on Reddit? How does this work?
Sure. So the system is far from perfect. And what he's referring to is originally there were no different sections of Reddit. And originally we started with the Reddit at the time, I wasn't there, but created some different ones, videos and news and these other things. And then at some point they decided, well, let's just let everybody create them. And then it sort of like opened up. But those original ones and some of the early ones were kind of had a head start, an unfair advantage. And I totally agree it's an unfair advantage, but it is possible. I know there were 2 rival LA communities for a while.
Oh, wow.
Because some people didn't like the way the moderators were moderating that LA community, and there was also more sort of dramatically, there was originally the biggest weed community on Reddit was the marijuana subreddit.
Wow.
And the guy who ran that by, at least online, was an asshole, to put it nicely. And so then the weed community created like several different communities, the biggest of which ended up being trees, which that is now way, way bigger than marijuana ever was. So yes, it is imperfect and it's unfair, and some of the moderators who were there early have a head start and all that, but the system can self-correct, and it's our job to sort of make that more of a fluid market. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, could it be better? Absolutely, but it can work to have, you can create a subreddit, today, and 2 months from now, it's one of the top 100 communities on Reddit. Like that happens, right?
The context of this larger discussion, is this a weak link? First, either the moderators or the communities, in that sense, being first come, first serve, who's in that position?
No, I mean, because the really bad ones will be, something else will come along and take its place.
Yeah, that's true.
One of the other, Russell Brandon. I'm interested in sort of contrasting what happened with Lost Bombers with other kind of misinformation that we've seen in media. When Hurricane Sandy happened, a lot of people were sort of intentionally spreading false rumors on Twitter. And people talked about the community sort of self-correcting in the way that people would sort of fact-check it, and eventually the sort of bad information would fall to the bottom, and the good information would come to the top. Do you think that the subreddit system and the way of organizing these smaller communities affects that in that, for example, like if I went to a, UFO subreddit, and people who believe in UFOs probably predominantly, right? And is that kind of self-selection have a bad or a good impact on it? I don't know, I'm curious if that troubles you, if you think it helps. Sorry, that was a lot.
Well, I mean, I don't think the self-selection part doesn't really trouble me. I mean, I think you're going to have those, especially in the political, realm, or even with sports teams, you're going to have, a bias in the Cleveland Browns subreddit or a bias in the libertarian subreddits, and that may make topics, sort of more popular or viewed a different way than they would be in a larger one. I don't think that's inherently bad, but when it comes to sort of these extreme situations like Sandy or Boston or whatever, where information's flying around, and everyone's kind of looking for anything to grasp onto, then yeah, people can get information that's heavily biased, or that but I don't think that's because of the sort of self-selection of the communities.
Yeah, just to continue with the Reddit conversation, can you talk about karma a little bit?
Sure, it's worthless.
Karma
is sorry.
So for non-Redditors,
karma is like it's sort of the point system on Reddit. So if you get a bunch of upvotes for your submission or your comment, you'll get a lot of karma. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't do anything.
Oh,
it's
really?
No. It doesn't. But I mean, I think it's a measure. It's
my bubble.
Sorry. I mean, it's a sort of social proof. Like if you have a bunch of karma, that doesn't necessarily mean you're, you're super, witty and intelligent. You might be, but it just means that you've had a lot of things on Reddit that have been voted up. Like, so it means you've been there a while, or it means you had something really popular. So it shows that you've kind of been there in a way that having zero, But I don't know. I don't think people look at it. I think people kind of watch their own karma scores, but I don't think it really influences how they interact with others.
And speaking of karma and how people are looking at your scores, you work with government officials, correct? They come to you, the Obama administration, Obama's been on Reddit and everything. How is negative? How do you think the government is handling how it's perceived in viral media, how it's being processed in viral media? How is the government really kind of viewing or engaging with social media in a way that because they would have to be somewhat concerned, right? Because it's kind of what do they come to with you the most?
Well, in our case, most of the government clients, it depends on whether you're talking about governments or public officials.
Oh, governments.
And in the case of governments, they have some agenda they're trying to promote, foreign direct investment and tourism or something like that. And they want people to forget about the Civil War and the human rights abuses of 20 years ago. But in the case of government officials, it's largely one of two things. Either it's about getting reelected and getting over criticism, or it's about paving the way and trying to influence public opinion so that they can get things done that they feel passionately about.
Can you do that?
We actually just added in our advisory board a gentleman named Dean Cannon, who's the former Florida Speaker of the House, and he's kind of advising us on these matters. It's really been very helpful.
Can you do that, though? Do you think it's possible to kind of sway public opinion through?
Sway is a big word, but you can certainly influence, control. It would not be the word I would use, but influence. I mean, the public forum is as big a marketplace of ideas as any you're going to find, and it's crazy and chaotic. And I don't criticize the folks that are in it because, Dean actually told me one day that he was happy not to be a politician anymore because now he can have more than 2 beers at dinner. Because if he had more than 2 beers at dinner, somebody would write about it on a blog somewhere.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Now, he wasn't being facetious or exaggerating. He meant 2 glasses of beer. Right? So there's a lot of scrutiny those people are under. And you know, it's just something to keep in mind when you criticize them.
So Jonah, if for example, there's a lot of people in here who are in digital media. So how many people in here are digital media strategists or marketers or considering themselves? Okay, I'm just curious. So when we go about creating viral, something that we want to be viral, or if a brand says, you know, I want to create a video, I want to, you know, kind of reach a broad audience and have them become engaged, what's kind of like the first thing that you would tell them that would be the most helpful?
In terms of creating content that will be shared?
In terms of creating content.
There's a whole book on it. It's good.
Yeah, no, that's and content is hard.
But so I would think about, you know, why people share things. And we've found 6 drivers of why people share things that repeatedly, you know, you talk about karma points, but why would someone want that? Well, they want it because they think it makes them look good to have more rather than fewer points. Social currency, right? We like looking good. We like having being upgraded to frequent flyer status, being ahead of other folks. So these characteristics matter a lot. They drive a lot of our behavior, and they drive what we share as well.
Okay. What are the other 6 things? I know you mentioned it quickly.
Social currency, triggers, emotion, public, practical value, and stories.
What's practical value?
Useful information.
Ah.
Yeah, so a lot of what we share, whether it's, you know, 10 tips for going to the beach this summer, you know, 5 things people hate at the office, you know, how discounts are framed to make them seem better. Groupon's done a great job of framing information to make it seem like a really good deal. What makes something seem useful?
Right, okay. What drives, then, do you think, our need to share negative viral media? And what I mean by that is, for example, if we see something that's kind of like, holy crap, I can't believe this is happening, share with my network, and even though it's not positive, what drives that? Is it being the first to share it? Is it like the most outrageous? Is it, I don't know.
I mean, we share all sorts of remarkable things, whether positive or negative. Right. So, you know, that Dove campaign with the sketch artist has gotten a lot of play lately. That's really positive, but in a remarkable way. An unusually one way or the other. Same thing with negative things. If we see something that's negative, but it's negative in a surprising, unexpected way, we're going to pass that on because it's worthy of remark. In part because we look good by sharing things that are different from what other people have seen already. And so I think there's always people pushing the envelope in other ways, and you know, sometimes maybe it's easier to push it in the negative way.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and we're going to start wrapping it up, but I do want to get questions. I definitely want to get your question. Yeah, of course. No, you. What? No, you.
No, me.
Both of you, but you first.
Okay. I had a question about things that were maybe perceived as negative, but maybe positive depending on maybe where in the country you are. For example, marijuana or marriage or whatever it is. Oreo famously did the rainbow Oreo and received both positive. If your company or yourself you're very passionate and you want to, you know, talk about your things socially that affect us all that you deem as positive, is that generally, especially reputation vendors, is that something that you would say go ahead and do? Is that something that means a lot to you, or do you think you should maybe play it safe and conservative and not post that picture on the network?
Well, I do have an answer for that. The conversation earlier when we were talking about Facebook, what's at issue is the leverage against you. So let me tell you two entities that are not clients of mine. Halliburton is not a client of mine because they don't care if you don't like them. That's my opinion.
Really?
Charlie Sheen is not a client of mine. Okay, he's not worried about his reputation. Right? In order for, you know, Facebook is never going to be the same, and Tumblr's never going to be the same, because, you know, they're now publicly traded companies and they have leverage against them they never had before. And a publicly traded company has to worry about growth and you know, shareholders and stock value, and that puts leverage on them that you don't get in other cases. And that's the reality of it.
So, okay, that's a good point. Don't hate me for bringing this up, but I have to, just because it's like, okay. So there's a girl by the name of Kim Kardashian whose whole life was changed over a video that went viral some years ago. Some of you have seen it, I have. No, but I'm just not gonna lie. Okay, how she handled that, and this was a different time. I mean, we're talking like 5 years ago, or whatever the case may be. And obviously it's an extreme case. It's not something that most of us will go into. But I find it interesting. Her way of handling it with her mother and her family and everything was to take it and kind of monetize it and make money off of it and build an empire on it. That aside, because she has built an empire on it. If you look at the expectations of what seems to be the expectations of Kim Kardashian now, if you follow it, and I somewhat do only because it's in my face constantly, she seems to have an expectation that now that she's made this money and she's big and she's online everywhere, that she will now be looked at as better than she was 5 years ago. But if you look at the coverage of her and you look at the stuff that still continues to go viral, it's very, very damaging, and it's very much reminding her you're pretty much still, you know, I mean, instead, you know, no, really. My question is, in regards to reputation management, are the expectations realistic in terms of what you can guarantee them as an outcome?
Well, in terms of trying to improve their reputation?
Improve their reputation?
Yeah, in almost all cases, you could improve your reputation. You can do something for yourself or get outside help. You know, let's take Angelina Jolie, for example.
Right.
You might sort of forget what she was like 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. Now that she's a brave cancer survivor, mother of 20 or whatever, and UN ambassador to whatever, you know, she's an entirely different person. It's one of the great PR efforts in history. Now, you know,
orchestrated.
Of course, orchestrated. Absolutely, masterfully orchestrated. You know, that's a case study that should be studied at work because she's been a genius. Somebody's been a genius at it, so you absolutely can do it.
Wow. Okay.
And don't forget, Charlie Sheen is making a lot more money as a bad boy, you know, than he was as kind of the guy who was annoying Michael Jordan in the underwear ads.
That's true. Wow, that's fantastic. I'm gonna get your question, and I'm gonna get one more question. I'll get yours, and then we're gonna wrap it up.
It's 9
yeah.
o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're gonna wrap it up. So let me just get your question. Yeah. Well, no, but you helped set this up. Can you just take his question, just because he helped set all of this up? Just get his question.
No, it was partially about ethics. First of all, do you see your response actually in the second thought about ethics? And that, are you ever put in a position, or are you ever in front of a situation where you're doing damage control, or you're doing what you're doing when you actually believe someone made it not a big fan of the person, or are there any ethical considerations in terms of your judgment or your assessment of a person and the work that you do?
Is that addressed to me?
I think so, yeah. I changed my question.
So we have an ethical code that says we won't help anyone spread something we know to be lies or intended to harm other people. Okay. And we police that very carefully. Given that, we view ourselves much like a defense attorney, that everyone gets the chance to tell their story, and we believe in second chances. And so some of our clients, we have a lot of clients who are victims, and the stories really make me sad. But we have clients who are not victims. And, you know, we're a country that loves second chances and stories and redemption, and we get to be a part of that in a lot of cases.
Okay, awesome. Okay. Listen, I'm going to start to wrap it up because these guys, they do have to go. But here's the good thing. I'm going to give you their presentations. Jonah has his workshop at the end of the month. I'll email you guys and let you know about that. I'll email you and let you know how to get in touch with them. I'm sure that they'll answer questions you have. I really want you to help me to thank them for coming in and talking with us. My